Good evening, all. Thank you very much for the invitation to speak tonight. I was watching the chat populate while Andy was talking, and it'd be fair to say that all corners of UK have been represented by viewers this evening. So that's really exciting. It's probably the biggest audience I've ever spoken to. And I'm very proud to be here, and probably one of the founding members with Keith and others of Trauma Care. So I'm very excited for this evening. So this evening I was asked to talk about empowering the public to save lives. And this is going to be framed against a charitable endeavour called citizenAID, which I'm part of. And I will be covering the design of the system, the conception, how it was created, and using a bit of context to illustrate its power in enabling the members of the public to react appropriately to an incident that results in casualties or multiple casualties. I'm very lucky to be part of a team of experts, leaders, clinical leaders, innovators, and leading lights in trauma. Brigadier Professor Tim Hodgetts, who is the Senior Health Advisor currently for the Medical Services, soon to be the Surgeon General. Professor Sir Keith Porter, as all we know from Trauma Care, Chairman of Trauma Care and co-founder, founding member. And Pete Mahoney, a military anaesthetist with many years of battlefield frontline experience in management of trauma patients. And myself, I'm actually a nurse by background. I trained in the army initially as a parachute regiment soldier and then transferred to the medical corps, did my nurse training in the army, and then moved out into the civilian world and specialised in emergency medicine, and then subspecialised in pre-hospital emergency care. And together, as the four clinicians, we came together and made citizenAID as it is. So why did we come together? Well, if you look through the sort of latter part of 2000, you could see a trend of incidents, of terrorist incidents, which resulted in multiple casualties. And as clinicians involved in the management of trauma, and many of us with our military experience, recognised that there was a situation developing on UK mainland where members of the public were being exposed to these types of incidents, but were probably not given the right tools to deal with the casualties or themselves before the emergency services arrived. And the tempo of incidents on mainland began to lift, and there were some sentinel events which certainly focused the public's eyes. And for me, I think that there was a change in people's attitudes significantly with the Manchester bombing, and certainly Parliament being attacked by the guy here who you can see who's been shot by the responding teams. So when you have high-profile events like this happening, the members of the public become more sensitized and anxious. So what we did is we looked at the context of what was happening in UK and thought, what would be the solution for members of the public? I remember, wherever you come from, whether you're a doctor, nurse, paramedic, first aider, fire officer, police officer, you're actually a member of the public when you're off duty, and you may be have no equipment around you and completely out of context of work. So it applies to all of us, really, what we've taught, what we put together in citizenAID. So contextually, I'm going to use an incident in Paris as an example of the scenario that citizenAID can be deployed. I'm going to show a video which actually is quite graphic. It is out there in the public domain, and some of you may find it upsetting, but I'll let it run and then we can dive back into the presentation. So this is the context of where citizenAID would hopefully work.
Oh, merde, God. Oh, man.
So what you can see there is the assault going into the Bataclan theatre, the police engaging with the terrorists, and actually a battle going on, and members of the public caught in the perimeter and actually in the scene itself, frozen and taking cover because there's nowhere else to go, nowhere to help them. And you saw people lying in the street. You saw people wandering around. You saw one lone police officer putting cover on a corner of a building, but there was no medical assets there. There was no medical treatment being carried out. There was no ambulance service. The police officer that was there was actually in a tactical role, and the members of the public were in what we would term a therapeutic vacuum. There was no care being delivered other than if maybe there's a first aider. And this has been well recognised. If you read through the press, you'll see it recorded multiple times that people have waited far too long. And I think it's an unfair criticism of our colleagues within the paramedic, police and ambulance fire service that they wait too long. Sometimes it's just not possible to get to everybody, find people, but there's actually an overlying security element to projecting medical assets forward, which is it has to be safe for them to do so first. So recently, the Manchester Arena had Tim Hodgetts present to the inquiry, and he used the phrase disaster gap. And this is what we see time and time again during incidents. And what citizenAID is designed to do is to populate that disaster gap with information, knowledge, skill that a member of the public who's got no medical training at all and allow them to help save lives, indeed help themselves if they're injured. So if we look at the incident and the themes that we see, there may be multiple casualties resulting from a shooting, stabbings, there may be an explosion, a vehicle may have been driven into a crowded space with people, and there may be an acid attack. But effectively, we start off with an incident where there's multiple casualties. The police messaging for these types of scenarios is very firm, very clear, which is to run, hide and tell. Run to a place of safety, hide. It's better to get out the way than to be actually to confront. We actually encourage people not to attack the people who are attacking them, and tell the police by calling 999. So it's a fairly powerful message, but what we feel is possibly quite superficial. Now, the reality of a scenario where there are multiple casualties and the police are responding is that they will not stop to deliver care as they arrive. The ambulance service, the fire service will kept out on the perimeter, the security service will move forward, and they will be very busy isolating, hunting down the threats and dealing with them. And they will be running past the casualties and not getting involved in care. So effectively, there will be no care going on despite the police being on scene. And we call this, really, this area, I've mentioned it before, the treatment vacuum or the disaster gap. Now, we know in the treatment vacuum that there will be people who die from bleeding, and there will be people who die from a loss of airway. And we also know that there'll be people potentially at higher risk because there's been no control of the scene. Crowds will be dispersing in all sorts of directions. There'll be panic, and people will possibly put themselves at risk by doing so. So there's also a management vacuum. Now, what we do with citizenAID is we empower the public to be able to stop bleeding and open an airway and actually have a system to control the scene. So citizenAID sits in this therapeutic vacuum with some practical skills to save lives, but also some managerial skills, simple tasks that can help to control the scene. And hopefully, we feel that with the citizenAID system, we can present more salvageable patients to our emergency service colleagues when they arrive. Patients wouldn't have bled out as much, people would have been breathing for longer and be having better brains for onward care, and you will effectively have more survivors. Now, the big key message here is the impact to save lives rests with the public. The public perceive that generally it's the emergency services who come along and help them. We need to educate the public that actually they need to take ownership of these types of situations. No one else is going to come and help them. If they are caught up in these situations, the emphasis is on them with the skill and knowledge to make a difference. Actually, if you go back in history, you will find that there are various texts and booklets that are about informing the public of what to do if they're caught up in incidents. And some of them go right back into the wars, and you can see that actually even in the sort of 80s, 70s, about how to protect yourself if you were under a nuclear attack. So we're used to informing the people of what to do. What we've done is we've taken that sort of theme and moved it into the modern day of the terrorist threats that exist within our homelands. If you go back into the Second World War, World War II, you had a little pamphlet that was put through the door, which you were told to keep on you and pull it out and read it if you ever needed to carry out care on somebody who's been involved in an air raid and got injured. Now, what the military have learned through the operations over the last 10 years or so is that if you push the medical capability right forward to the soldier and you give him the skills, him or her the skills to stop bleeding, keep an airway open, you have extraordinary survivors who would normally have succumbed to their horrific injuries. So the military lessons learnt over the decades are now being picked up, put into civilian context, civilian language, and pushed forward into society through citizenAID. And what we've effectively created is our aim, which is basically using the medical lessons learnt from conflict, Afghanistan, Iraq, and other theatres, that actually citizenAID system enables the member of the public, and this could be anybody, okay, with no medical training at all, to be able to stay safe and save lives. And that is about empowering the public to be able to step forward and make a difference. So citizenAID was launched over the week of Counterterrorism Awareness Week in 2016. And we had a relatively soft launch. We were feeling our way around the space. We'd got the idea, we'd got some of the material ready, and we decided to sort of track the CT Awareness Week and see how we would go. It came to the new year, and then the BBC picked up on what we were doing as an endeavour. We're very interested in how citizenAID could be publicised, and they got behind us, and for 24 hours they pushed and covered citizenAID over their worldwide service. And they created a video for us which went on to the 6 o'clock news, and that exploded around the world with interest, and we were very busy as co-founders running at the press and answering their questions and giving interviews. At one point, I ended up giving an interview to the Russian television service about citizenAID, which was a rather challenging interview, as you can imagine, but great fun. Now, this is the video that the BBC ran as part of our hard launch, and I'll just let this play for a bit to show you that this is an active shooter scenario that was developed in a training venue in Hereford.
Yeah, a shooting. There's a gunman in the street. 3 people have been shot. Says that you need to hack the wound and then put the pressure on the wound. And then keep the hand elevated above the heart.
So this was a step change for us. For the first time on mainstream TV, the public will be given a very hard message of what to do when involved in a terrorist assault. They were all very sensitized to the events that had happened previously, and all of a sudden a solution was being offered forward. And we knew that this was a significant point for us. Our website, a humble little website that we'd created, crashed because we were receiving over 1 million hits a day on the BBC hard launch period. And that was unprecedented. And we knew that the public wanted to know more. So we worked hard to keep up with demand and put information out there. And the BBC need to be thanked for the support in the early days. So let me look at the system now. Now the system, I just want to reflect against other systems that are out there. If you go across the America, or in fact around the world, you will have come across the Stop the Bleed campaign, which has been hugely successful in training over 1 million people in how to stop bleeding. And if you compare that to what the citizenAID model is like, then you'll see that actually the Stop the Bleed is actually quite a focused, a single intervention campaign where you teach people how to stop bleeding, and that's it. Whereas within citizenAID, it is a suite of information, skill, and an all hazards system that allows the member of the public to respond to various scenarios and have managerial options to deal with them. So there's a lot more depth and breadth to citizenAID for the public compared to the Stop the Bleed. citizenAID does exist in America, more of a business front, whereas in UK it's an entirely charitable organisation. So the system we like to think is the compass out of chaos. The members of the public haven't been taught what to do, but if they use our approach, they can mentally rehearse and they can respond appropriately. Even if there's a slight change in a response to it positively, that's better than arriving at a scene and not knowing what to do. So we have an app and we have a pocket guide, and we also have a piece of equipment which allows people to use a piece of clothing to improvise to create a tourniquet. And we use this little plastic device, which I'll talk about later, called a tourniquet. So the app and the system and the pocket guide all pivot around these main headings: how to respond to a knife attacker, active shooter, somebody using a vehicle as a weapon, how to respond to an explosion, how to respond to somebody who's been attacked with acid, how to deal with an unattended item, which is actually quite a common occurrence, particularly in crowded spaces, and gives the security services quite a headache at times, how to deal with a suspicious item, and of course, how to save lives. So the pocket guide is quite small, cost about £1 on the store, on our website, and basically concertinas, one half of it is managerial, the other half of it is treatment. So your preparation and response is on one side, which you can sit at and rehearse and read at your own leisure. And similarly, the treatment will empower you with the knowledge to be able to make a difference if someone presents with injuries. It's very important that the members of the public are taught from the beginning that the system isn't something you pull out of the bag when you need it. It's something that you use to frame your thoughts around, to reflect against, and to rehearse. So mental rehearsal for this is really important. And we do have a preparation element to the system where we teach people to be aware, how to be observant, be ready for an incident, and perhaps engage in our charity by becoming a volunteer. We also have a website, which we will give an address for at the end of the presentation, which has lots of information, lots of material, which is all free to the public. So we encourage the public to prepare. So let's look how we react to a shooting or a stabbing, because the response should be the same. So enable us to get this quite hard message across to the public. We've created a cartoon series which allows us to be quite graphic without turning people yellow and making them feel sick. If you know, as clinicians, we have lots of clinical pictures of our patients that we've dealt with who've been shot or stabbed. For us, we can understand them, they're clinical and informative and educational, but for a member of the public seeing that, they would find that offensive. So this cartoon approach enables us to get the message across without upsetting anybody. So we've created Good citizenAID. It's a safe place to learn. And we're going to go into the shopping centre and see an incident unfold. So there we are inside the shopping precinct, and it's a quiet Saturday morning, and an active shooter appears and starts to shoot people. And through the cartoon, we can position casualties around, we can see people running away, we can see context, and we can use this to frame how to respond. So clearly you wouldn't get your app out during a shooting situation because you've already done this as part of your mental rehearsal, but this is what the active shooter stream would show you. So you click on active shooter, what would I do? So the first thing the phone does, it will tell you to switch your phone to silent. Now on various platforms, it will respond in a slightly different way. On an Android, this button will turn your phone off automatically. On an iPhone, actually it prompts you to flick your phone to silent. And the reason why you need to do that, you don't want your phone creating a sound signature for someone to hear if they're looking for you to shoot you or stab you. So turning your phone to silent is a wise action. Next thing it will take you to is to the run, hide and tell aspect. And we know that early escape from an incident increases your chance of survival. If you can't run away, then you need to hide. Once you're in a safe place to hide, then you need to tell the police what is going on. So the run, hide, tell in the app is actually expandable. So the members of the public can be informed about how to, dare I say it, run properly, escape if you can, use the safest route, leave things behind, don't take them with you because they'll slow you down, encourage others to come with you and try and find a safe haven. Now, a safe haven is often something somebody hadn't even thought about, and it's what schools now have in their plan, in their sort of intruder plan, somewhere where you can go, you can lock down and keep everybody safe until the police arrive. We show the public how to hide properly. If you can't run away, then you need to find some cover from gunfire. You need to lock or barricade yourself in, keep low, keep quiet, turn your phone to silent, as I've said, and keep away from the doors and windows. You'd be fascinated to see footage of people involved in these types of incidents, peering through the windows, looking out, waving, drawing attention to themselves. Simple things like that can save your life. And it teaches you to tell the police to put your phone onto silent. But what we also do is we give the system, the public, a system where they can inform the emergency services using a mnemonic slide. Now, for those of you who have done a MIMS course will recognize that this is probably as close as you get to methane. We can't use methane because that's been reserved for the emergency services. So we created slide as a sort of a brother to methane, and it's very similar information, but simplified for the member of the public. Now, there are two types of slide. There is a slide for a bombing, which has specific information tailored to a bomb type incident. And there's a slide response for an attacker. And if you go into the app, you'll be able to see, if you click on bomber and then you go onto your slide message, it would look slightly different to as if you were responding to a shooter. And that's because there's information in there that's slightly different, that's pertinent to the police. So once you've done your handover of your message, you're going to triage your patients. And we use a very military style approach to triage, very simple. And basically you start at the top and you work down, and where you get to as a member of the public, if there's severe bleeding, then the answer yes, and they click, they're a high priority, and you can move on to pack and press or use a tourniquet to stop the limb bleeding. Now, if there's a single casualty, it will take you to treat. So this tells the public what they can do to save lives. This empowers them. They don't need to worry about legislation, being sued. These are actions that have been cleared to be done in a situation where if nothing was done, the person would die. These are extraordinary circumstances, and they're doing their very best to save a life. So what can they do? So first thing we do push out is it's very important that you have to be safe before moving forward or carrying out any treatment. Because there is a risk, obviously, getting drawn into casualty care, that they become caught up in an incident or get attacked by drawing attention to themselves. So they must make sure that it's safe to approach first. Using the app or the pocket guide, it will take you to the casualty first look. And basically you start at the top and you find the situation that you have with your patient and you click on the element that you find. So in this case, the person's not breathing, and you follow the system. Is the chest rising or falling? No. Is it a single casualty? Must keep yourself safe. If there is a single casualty, then you can start CPR if you're trained. Now, if it's not a single casualty and there are multiple casualties, then you would not start CPR. And that's quite helpful for the members of the public to rehearse. And we recognise in a mass casualty situation that if you're not breathing, when you've had your airway open, then you are probably dead, and you've got to move on. So do not start CPR and move on to the next casualty is what we teach people. Then we move on to, are they bleeding? Now, severe bleeding is a big part of the system because a lot of people die unnecessarily from bleeding out. So right up the top there, we've got, if the patient has a mangled limb or they're amputated, they go straight to putting on a tourniquet. There's no assessment required. If the limb is missing or smashed to pieces, they're going to get a tourniquet, and it's a very simple action. If the wound is deep or superficial, we teach people to pack and press, and we can use items of clothing or equipment if you've got it, but simple equipment that's around you, because very often in these situations, there's no medical equipment around, so it's okay to improvise. And we've had lots of dialogue with various organizations about improvisation and do you get infected if you put this sock into a wound? And we had to reassure people time and time again, it doesn't really matter. We're not worried about infection at that point in time. We're using the item of clothing to stop somebody from bleeding to death. So it's allowable. We can deal with the infections later on. We then tell people to maintain the pressure on the limb and elevate it if you can by using your hands, some items of furniture, or maybe a blanket. So using equipment, but it's okay to improvise, did cause us problems, but I think we're now getting there with acceptance with members of the public. We're not saying that medical equipment is not necessary. If you've got it, fantastic, use it. But most of the time, like I've said, it won't be available. So you're going to have to use your scarf, your tie, your sock, or a t-shirt to help a wound stop bleeding. Now, if there is limb bleeding that you can't stop by direct pressure, then a tourniquet is advocated. And we encourage people to, again, use stuff that's around them, to improvise, to use a windlass approach, to wrap something around a limb, create a windlass, turn the rod until the bleeding stops and hold it there. If they've got nothing around them but a common item such as a belt, then yes, it's okay to use a belt, but that must be held tight all the time until the emergency services arrive. A belt is suboptimal, but it can work, and it has worked in the past. Now here's a picture from a training video that we created of a guy with an upper arm amputation, and someone's used a black tie to go around the limb, create a windlass, and turn the screwdriver until the bleeding has stopped, and the guy is holding that there, and that will keep him alive. If that hadn't been applied, that guy would have dripped with blood over a period of time, lost his blood pressure, collapsed, probably lost his airway, and died. So this is a life-saving intervention, even though it doesn't look hideous at the beginning, because he will bleed further down the line if we don't do something. If you've got the sense to do so, then try and remember to put the time that you applied the tourniquet to the individual. So, as I've said, we use a very short circuit if someone has a mangled limb or an amputation, straight to a tourniquet, and we can use this little device which we innovated called a tourniquet, and I'll talk a little bit more about that a little later on. And it's effectively a plastic rod that you can put into a knot, and you can turn and turn and turn until you get the tension around the limb to stop the bleeding, and then the hook on the end allows you to dig into the cloth that you've used to cause the tourniquet and lock it in position. Neat little device and very cheap. So there's the tourniquet in two positions. You twist and twist and twist, and that's the hooking over the cloth, which is a quick lock. And then if you tuck it underneath and come back on yourself, as you see on the right-hand side of the screen, then that would give you what we would call the hard lock, which stops the tourniquet unflicking. The next thing to do on the app is if you have somebody not responding, open the airway if you can, take out any debris that you can see, and then rapidly turn them onto their side, maybe extend their neck to put them into an airway position of protection. You may have, if you've got the ability to have someone deployed, may have the person monitored, but you need to get them onto their side to protect their airway. Now, if you come across casualties with broken bones, simple actions such as don't move the limb if it's too painful, or you can use the clothing that the patient's wearing to create a sling to provide some stability. And even bringing the legs together, binding them with clothing is encouraged to, if they can do so. Now, thermal burns are also covered in the app. We encourage people to use water, running water over the burn. This will help with obviously cooling the burn injury, but also analgesia, give the patient some pain relief. And we encourage them within the burns guidelines not to do this for more than 20 minutes. Okay. So the next thing we covered, because there was an emerging theme of acid attacks, we introduced this into V2 of our app, is the actions on somebody who's received an acid burn. And there's the information there, which is quite simple. But the diagram there, which describes how the water should be poured over the face to keep it away from the eyes, not being inhaled, is quite helpful for the public who's trying to rehearse what to do in these types of situations. And of course, if you have casualties and you're waiting for the emergency services to arrive, then you need to think about trying to make the environment a little bit more acceptable for your casualty who's got no ability to look after themselves. So we get members of the public to just consider how they would make it a little bit more easier for the casualty while they're waiting. Okay. And the important part of the system, having done the triage and treatment, is the handover to the professional services when they arrive. And we use the standard MIST format. And with our recent released equipment, we include in that a little card, which is like a casualty treatment card, but also if you fold it open, inside is a simple handover note in sort of citizenAID speak that the member of the public could tick off and use to hand over to the professional services when they arrive. Very quick, very simple, and it follows the MIST format. Now that's the system. And it's a flyby of the system because I haven't got enough time to go in it in depth, and I've used only one theme. If you go into the system, you'll realize there's a bit more to it, and I'll leave you to do that in your own time by either visiting our website or looking at the app, which is free to download from Google or Android. Now, we recognized earlier on that in our history that we must not only inform the public, but also to begin to sensitize and educate our younger members of the population. This is actually my family. This is Matthew, James, Charlie, Max, and Libby. They're all a bit bigger and a bit louder now than when I took this picture, as you see here. But as a father, I wanted my kids to be aware of what to do if they were ever caught up in a situation, which may be in a pub fight, it may be something that happens in the town while they're traveling around. But I just wanted them to be safe and have the skill to be able to respond. And one of my lads now, in fact, two of my lads are at university, and they're sharing the information they've learned from their dad and the app with their colleagues, and it's really popular. So I'm pleased to see that they're sharing the information within the younger groups. Now, we did approach the House of Lords, and Lord Jordan very kindly took to the floor and spoke about the importance of having this type of messaging within schools. And we were very grateful for his support, which he gave to us in March 2017. And a debate ensued, and there was lots of effectively cross-party support for citizenAID being introduced into schools. We've created a series of educational packs for children. If you're at primary school, we could use the Moggy's Coming storyboard, which takes the story of run, hide and tell and treat and puts it into the context of a cat that's attacking a school of mice and how they should all run, hide and tell. So you're teaching school kids, very young kids, that message of run, hide and tell, and when safe to do so, treat, but through safe storytelling, through cartoon. And we delivered this to my local primary school, and it was a very moving moment to see the children all sat there having the story read to them by the headmistress, and they were absolutely captivated by it all. There were some really grown-up questions coming from the kids from the floor afterwards, which told us who were watching that they were engaged and understood what was going on. Children know that there is a problem in society. They listen to their mum and dads talking, they hear the news, they gossip amongst themselves in the playground. And so it was entirely appropriate for the kids to have this type of information. And we were really proud of the response. If you're in middle school, then you can lift up the ante a little bit. You can have a lion that's escaped, and you can teach the run, hide and tell message, and when safe to do so, treat, by using a lion escaping into a playground and tearing up kids. That often creates a bit of a chuckle amongst the children, but it's getting them to learn a system, learn an approach in a non-threatening manner. And then when you go into secondary school, you can turn up the ante a little bit more and be a bit more serious. And here we have an active shooter impacting on a school. and how the school should respond if that ever were to happen. And again, we've used this material, we've shared it with teachers, and we've had on one survey we did at the beginning, we had 100% compliance with the question, response from the question, would you use this in the school? And 100% of the teachers said they would, and 100% of that same group said it was appropriate for the ages that we designed it for. So we found that as a really encouraging to our endeavour to get it into schools. Personally, I experienced the pickup of Run, Hide and Tell and Treat through citizenAID by delivering a session to the Holt School, which is in Lozells, and the audience were sixth formers, and they all sat there for an hour and a half through a presentation, through a practical session. And afterwards, the head of the year came up to me and he said, Andy, what on earth have you just done to my sixth formers? I've never seen them sit so still and be so captivated and attentive for so long, ever. And the reason was, when we asked the kids, they said they wanted to know what to do. They were sat there, and for the first time that somebody was giving them a solution to an anxiety that they had about society, that the streets that they lived in. They were given a toolkit which they could take away and use in their sort of daily lives. So we know that the system works in schools across all ages, and there is fantastic potential for this to take off with more work in our educational system. Within citizenAID, we've worked in collaboration with various providers, and here we have QualSafe, who very kindly supported citizenAID from the very early days, and they've created a level 2 award in citizenAID, and this allows people who want to have training in the concepts and the principles of the practical skills of citizenAID, and have a sort of a formal certificate to show that they've been through the training. And when you get to corporate organisations, they're quite interested in making sure that there's an assurance that people who work for them have had the training and they continue to be trained. So through a governance process, it's quite useful for people to have a framework such as QualSafe's citizenAID level 2 award, for example, for security guards, stadium staff or door staff, who then can move along on a annual 18-month refresher training and have that documented. So we're very grateful for QualSafe in supporting citizenAID. We've worked collaboratively with other organisations. We've obviously got our own pocket guide, but we have been approached by other organisations, and here's the med school at University of Central Lancashire, who asked us to embed citizenAID in their medical student cohort. So we white labelled our pocket guide, and they bought 1,000 of us and gave it to their students for free. We've also worked with the government in Gibraltar to create a solution for them. And very recently, we've worked closely to develop a partnership with the St John's Ambulance, who've been fantastic supporters of citizenAID, and they now have their own pocket guide, which has been labelled as a citizenAID St John Ambulance collaborative. Another collaboration which we were very proud of was to find a piece of kit that would enable the members of the public to save lives from somebody who was bleeding to death, who needed a tourniquet, an improvised tourniquet applied. And with our collective thoughts, we'd come across we'd created a concept of how we think a tool should look. It was rough line drawings, it was a bit of putty molded into a shape, it was a piece of metal that had been fashioned and filed. We had an idea what it was like, but we needed now to take it from idea into production. And we were very grateful for Airbus, who offered us their chief CAD designer and chief engineer from Europe, and they gave us a whole day of their time, and from zero to completion they were able to manipulate and create the tool for us, and they did all that for free, and we're ever very grateful for Airbus for the support that they gave to us to take the idea and make it into something real, a real tool for members of the public to save lives with. We've also got videos on the website, which are all free for the members of the public to access, but also free to our ambassadors and trainers who wish to share the teaching of citizenAID amongst groups of small groups of people. And if I just dip into a couple of them to give you an idea of what they're like, I won't let them run to the length because they'll take up too much time. But here is a video of somebody having a improvised tourniquet being applied. The first one's not working, so there's a requirement for a double tourniquet, which we teach.
Okay, we've got to stop the bleeding. Pass me that scarf there, and then meantime, I'll just put a piece of watermelon or anything. Small, please. Okay. I'm applying pressure. This is going to hurt. Hold this here for me, please. And relax, matey. Relax. Look out for me. Let me just turn this. Okay. It's going to hurt. I know, but just relax. Do think, can you just hold this here for me? Still won't stop bleeding.
You can see there they've moved on now to start using a belt for the second tourniquet, but the other videos are very similar and they're very skills orientated, but they're all there for free on our website. So if you haven't got the app on your phone, then I would encourage you to download it. If you point your phone at the QR code on the screen now, you should be able to be taken straight to the store so you can download it. The Apple is on the left and the Android version is on the right. If you are interested in how citizenAID presented yesterday, I think it was, on the 1st of March at the Manchester Arena Inquiry, then the QR code will take you there. Or if you go to the Manchester Arena Inquiry website and look for the 1st of March in the morning session, you'll find Brigadier Hodgetts giving a presentation and also answering questions to the QC around the use of citizenAID in the context of a mass casualty situation. And there's lots of information in there which will support the presentation which I've just given this evening. That is a Bouldersaurus. That was a flyby view of citizenAID, a system which has been designed to empower the public to save lives. We are still, I think, in the very early phases of our existence, even though we've been going for nearly 5 years now. I think there are great potentials. And the key thing about tonight for me is that there are a lot of healthcare professionals who are joining us tonight, but we are all still members of the public. But as healthcare professionals, we can be fantastic ambassadors for the charitable's aims by going out to members of our family, to groups, clubs and all sorts, and actually sharing the information. And the key thing here is that the information to do that is all free. If you go to our website, everything you need to be able to share the information I've done tonight is there for you to use. So if you need to know anything more, then do get in contact with Mike at our citizenAID headquarters. His details are also on the website. And thank you very much. I'll hand back to Andy.